This is the Uncommon Ground final group dialogue. And my name is Valerie Green, and I'm the artistic director of Green Space, where I've had the pleasure to meet you all and to curate you all into this program. And I just want to say that I really enjoyed looking back through the history of the organization. It was a bit of a trip down memory lane. And Green Space's mission has always been to be inclusive of everyone in all genres of work and styles, discipline, ages. And I felt proud and honored to be watching the dialogues and seeing how everybody might be in a different place by now, how the work has evolved. And I found such relevancy in everybody's work and the humanity in it, a sense of timelessness and also spirituality. And I found it so interesting, everything that everybody was saying. And I also felt really moved and touched and just proud to be a part of sharing space with you all. And also that you could find new bridges and connections with one another as well was another beautiful moment. So without further ado, we're going to sort of just jump in to looking at these questions and which you all have received in advance, and so hopefully had some moment to reflect on. And I want to start with this one. Have you seen any adaptation or evolution in the field for artists of color, Black artists, BIPOC, whatever words we want to use here to include everybody, since the BLM movement this June started? And I thought to add this in. It was in the conversation with Laurie Taylor where she mentioned the need to address how someone wants to be looked at as an artist and new ways of looking at work through new lenses. And so sometimes I want to reflect on where the comment came up. So if you can introduce your name as we go around and you share any thoughts you want to include, that would be great.
I think something that came up in my dialogue and conversation that I'd had earlier. Guys, I'm Laurie Michelle Taylor, dancer and choreographer. I'm actually currently in Liberia, West Africa, visiting my family. So I am just running slightly behind and I'm a little bit sweaty, but I'm so happy to join you guys and be part of this. But let me just jump right in. I think that idea of sort of changing the lens of how people see us as artists of color, and particularly Black artists or BIPOC, is important. And the reason I say that is because for so long, I believe the lens has been skewed. I believe that there has been a certain perception or even misconception about the way people see Black artists and what it means to be a Black artist. And the idea that we are not a monolith, that we are diverse in and of ourselves, and that there isn't just one lens by which we want to be seen. And I also think that there is diversity and much intersectionality in Black identity. And so, there are many lenses, if you will. There are multiple, almost more like a kaleidoscope, if you will, a variation of ways to see our work and for it to be interpreted. I think that's maybe was the sentiment of that particular statement at the time. So, but you guys chime in. But yeah, I would definitely say that for me, seeing Black artists through a different lens is important because perception is relative. It's relative to people's experiences, it's relative to people's exposure. And so I think the more and more, not just dance audiences, but other choreographers and dance institutions and foundations become more exposed to the diversity of Blackness, essentially, that they themselves will begin to see us through various lenses and see that diversity and see that intersectionality through our work and through our craft.
To be honest, I'm looking at my little card that says truth on it. I'm like, tell the truth. I have, during this time, myself and the people I work with who are all Black, have secluded and went inward, more inward. And so the care about what perspective everyone is seeing has kind of started to kind of be this funny thing where it goes back to trying to figure out what's being sold versus what's like being held, and how do you share, and what perspective am I even giving personally in general, even if I have all these shades, do I want to show you all the shades so I can sell them to you? Like, like all of that kind of stuff is starting to pop up right now. So the truth is, for me, like I don't know if I care about how Blackness is shared in amongst my people. But it's starting to not really, I don't really know if I care about outside of that right now, for me. But I do think that there is some love that can come from the sharing amongst my own people, that people can feel, and then that can also connect to other people. But that's just, I think, where I am.
I can jump in on that as well. My name is Nick Deers. I'm the founder and director of the Dana Movement Ensemble based here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I too have been taking this time in COVID and being in seclusion just to really focus on what I'm doing and getting back into what my art is to me and who am I? Because I took a very, very long break and then I came back. I took a 20-year hiatus and came back. And when I came back strong doing all this, doing all these different projects. But I found myself, as I was going on, leaving myself and leaving my identity out of the work. So I've taken this time to really just focus on what I'm doing. And with that being said, I'm really at a point where I'm not worried about how people feel about what I'm doing. I feel I want to be happy with me and what I'm doing. And then that will go and be passed on to others. But right now, I feel like as an artist, I and many of my friends, we're just focusing in on what we're doing, because if you don't focus in on your wellness, you'll go under. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to add that in there.
I'll say something. I'm Nicole McClam. I do my own work, but I also dance with several others in Washington, D.C. and in New York. I'm currently in Queens. I definitely resonate with what Johnnie and Nick and Laurie. Thank you for the reminder. But I will say, out in the world on the Facebooks and Instagrams, I am seeing definitely a lot more intersectionality, and sort of proudly. But personally, I have been much more secluded, especially as my private space has now become my public space. I find that I'm much more guarded with what I will share and when I will share, and really thinking about my own care. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Hi, we're Nia and Ness. We're a dancer poet duo based here in Rosendale, New York.
He's Nia, I'm Ness.
Oh yeah. But if you say either name, we both will answer. So there you go. But for me as a dancer, I haven't really seen a shift, and I think that's because of the lens that I have and the artists that I follow. Like the artists that I follow, we've been doing this work. Like it didn't just start now. We're talking about Blackness and racism and homophobia and all those things. Like we've been doing this. So like for like, even in our work and the work that we see and that we're taking in, like there hasn't been this giant shift. I'm seeing more white artists try to include artists of color and Black artists, but then it also makes me question like why are you doing this now when you should have been doing it, and how long is it going to last? Because I'm already, we've all been seeing like you were seeing the Black squares everywhere, the Black Lives Matter everywhere, all the names all the time, and where are they now after like a month? So I haven't really seen this like huge shift. And like we are just naturally secluded, like we're up in the boonies. So we're up here in the woods.
Yeah.
So we are very secluded, and like naturally just the quarantine just made us even go more inwards.
Are focusing more on the conversations than
Yeah.
our art rather than putting our art out right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I would love to
Oh.
tag on to Nia and Ness, if I may, just to speak on two things that they spoke about. One being focusing on my own art and really the conversation around what's happening and how that conversation influences what I'm working on, which I have done somewhat in the past, but have really kind of taken to heart that practice during this quarantine. And then the number two thing was you all touched on our white counterparts maybe extending a hand during the Black Lives Matter movement and during this time. And so I found myself trying to be more Black, or what, you know what I mean, to prove to myself that I'm worthy of being here doing this work. But I have to take a step back and just look at my skin. You know, I know they say all skin folk ain't kin folk, but I still walk the walk and live the life. So until, you know, so I just have to make sure that I still stay, you know, tell the truth. Like Johnnie said, tell the truth and tell my truth, rather than trying to move in a way that puts me in a better position of looking like a Black man. You know what I mean? Does that make sense, everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I just want to be clear about, I think when I talk about the lens earlier, I think when I say lens, it's not really about caring about how other people perceive us. Because I want to clarify that. I'm not sure. I don't think that's what anybody was saying, but I want to be clear for myself about what I'm saying, because I want to articulate the fact that having perception is relative, but not because you value perception over your own reality. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, that's a different thing, because we can always perceive ourselves of who we are, or what we do, but not necessarily because we're concerned about what other people think over our own value. You know what I'm saying? So there's a difference between being concerned about perception of others over the perception of ourselves versus just saying people need to do better about how they look at us, because that's really what, in essence, I'm saying. I do think that others need to do better about perception. Other people need to be more exposed about what it is that we do. For so long, it's always us having to acquiesce to whiteness, essentially. It's always us having to acquiesce to otherness or mainstreamness in order to be successful. Even a little bit of what Gierre, am I saying that correctly?
Yes,
is what
yes.
he's saying a little bit, which is this idea of, you know, constantly, you know, let's not pretend that the system that we're working within is a white system. It just is what it is. And so sometimes, even when we're not able to change that system, you have to be savvy about how you navigate it. You may not, it's just like the system we live in, like in America, not just dance. I'm talking about everything, politics, economics, everything, because what we do is a microcosm as artists of the larger world that we live in. So, you know, we may not be able to change that system, but I do know that the work that we do, we navigate with a sense of savvy that is so much smoother and different. Because I'm not really interested in changing the system, which is, I'll tell you this, I'm in Liberia, West Africa right now because of that. Because I needed to get out of the United States. I have the benefit, I'm just talking a little bit personally here, but it is relevant to this work. You know, I have the benefit of being Liberian American, so I have that option to come to somewhere else or go somewhere else. But I needed to come and study. I needed to come and be amongst my people. I needed to come and get out of the American context for a little bit because it was suffocating me. Someone talked about becoming very insular. I feel the same way. So yeah, I just agree and feel the same way. But I did want to clarify about the lens comment that it's not about caring about what other people think, but it is more so about seeing ourselves within that larger context, whether regardless of how other people see us or not. I hope that's more clear, guys. I'm sorry.
Thank
Hello,
you, Laura.
everyone.
Yeah, we're gonna give Vincent.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vincent E. Thomas, and I am in Towson, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway peoples. And it's so wonderful to see so many just beautiful faces, those of you that I know and those of you that I will get to know even more. And thank you for this question, because and I really appreciate and value the perspectives that each of you have brought forth. And I really appreciate the clarity that Laurie just gave with that as well. Some things that I've been thinking about around this question and hearing you, because I've, so many things have been popping up. So I'm going to be really short. I agree with Mia and Ness. I don't feel that I have shifted in my work, that because I've been doing this work, and I stand in the footprints of my ancestors, my big mom, my great grandmother, and my great grandfather. And that's what I know. I know those people, and I know the experiences from which I come from. And those experiences from which I come from is where I began to make art from. And, they say that we are the sum of our experiences. And for me, that's going to be a question mark, so that I can keep pondering that question too. Because if that's true, then that's what I've been doing. That's what we've been doing. That's what we know. And so, and it is about navigating and doing this dance with this Eurocentric white system, and how to not only survive, but how to thrive in that system, so that we don't have to become the chameleon and change the clothing because of the whiteness that we are around, but we can stand in our power and all the beautiful colors and nuances that make me who I am as a gay Black male in this country.
So I'm Leah Tubbs. I'm the founding artistic director of Modern Dance Collective. That is a Harlem-based modern dance company. And I feel that everything that everyone has said definitely resonates deeply. For me personally, especially recently, I've been asking myself, does this coincide with spirit or ego? Really asking myself as I continue, because the artists that I'm so grateful and fortunate to be working with, we're going to be building a piece from the ground up, and starting to ask myself as we resume rehearsals next week, is this coming from a place of community? Is this coming from a place upon the shoulders of the ancestors and elders that I stand upon, as opposed to, especially being based in New York, where unfortunately it tends not to be 3/4 dimensional, which I mean, it doesn't always need, it's not always centered on the 4 bodies, which means it's not always centered on the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical. It's just mainly focused primarily basically physical. And so really trying to not just, when I connect and commune with people in our field, it's not about talking about upcoming work, but it's really about asking, how are they? Like, how are they nurturing themselves? How are they taking care of themselves? Because if you heal yourself, you're going to heal the world. So again, like so many of you guys have said, you have to turn inward and make sure that you are not being a hypocrite, but you're doing the critical work. So when you are able to expand and share that, I feel like that's when we're able to make more impactful change.
I'm Ashley Suttlar Martin of Forthright Dance. And I would agree that our conditions have given us this moment of introspection to find what is our authentic self. right? Because we put that out and we can say that it's innate within the work all the time, but how much are we being affected by what's happening in the environment inside your own space and outside of that space? I agree as well. I don't think that the work has changed. It's just like with other things that are sensationalized, you know, like even putting dance on TV when ballroom was really popular. It's the same thing that happens, unfortunately, throughout history, that these moments are cyclical. Hopefully we can incite a different perspective this time, or for some people who appear to be advocates, but there's no telling when the history has repeated itself so many times. So I do agree that taking a moment in for care and really trying to find that authenticity is part of our responsibility as artists, and part of the reason why we are where we are today in this seclusion, I think, is because it's so necessary for us to grow from here and continue the dialogue.
Okay, thank you everybody for sharing your thoughts. Going to move us to the next question. The phrase Black dance came up in many of the conversations, and I am curious what this means to everybody. And I want to reference one conversation. It was in Nicole and Gierre's conversation where it was brought up that a tilt as in Horton associated with this technique that's used by the Ailey company as, and if I'm misquoting this, please, I apologize in advance, is seen as Black dance. And I thought that was really interesting because I think of it as a technique and not an association. And I'd be curious on what people's thoughts on what this quote Black dance means, as how does this look?
Well, I'm just curious, before you hear any responses, is it possible for you to articulate what has it meant for you in the past? What did Black dance mean for you? How did you describe it?
I don't think I made it Black dance look a certain way in my head. I think as I saw in everybody's work that there's many different ways of sharing one's story and sharing one's experiences. And I don't sort of frame it in one way or label it with a certain picture in my mind, to tell you the truth. So my honest answer would be I don't have a vision of like, oh, that's Black dance. And I feel like a very open to what that means, but curious about this being like labeled as such. Go ahead.
Okay. I didn't introduce myself, by the way. Johnnie Mercer, company director of the Grad Project NYC. Important. I think that Black dance, this goes back to the perception idea. I wrote down that the perception and the setting of a thing creates a situation. And since we're on the stage is definitely a location of oppression for Black people in general, and how we started in it. You know what I mean? And what that is. So going from that in relation to knowing what Black dance is in that space, then I immediately start to kind of get a little worrisome, because I feel like I'm in a box, trapped, and forever to speak about my identity versus explore when I'm on the stage. So when I'm on the stage, I feel like no matter what, the identity portion of code switching, all of that is in play. So it's always about this idea of me presenting because of the way I'm being shared. So like in general, the perception is changed when I'm on stage. So Black dance for me, I feel like Valerie, I feel like no matter what you do, when I go on stage, you see me, and then you're gonna have a number of things that you see in commercial art and anything in the world, media, that's been put into your mind. It's not your fault, and it's not my fault. But I feel like once I go on that stage, that happens there. So I don't know, Black dance for me gets trapped by identity when it's on stage. But when it's out of stage and it becomes like something completely different, which is what I'm more interested in, honestly. So if Black dance on stage is what we're talking about, I'm kind of not interested. So I'm starting not to like, I care about it for historical purposes.
I think that you get to a certain point where people or things have defined us based off of certain aesthetics. But I wasn't in that conversation, but I think maybe that quote, I'll tell you how it triggered me. And my initial thought when you read that quote was, I know exactly what you mean. Like when we see a Horton Tilt, what do we think of? Black dance America. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to be funny, but yeah, exactly. You all, even the fact that you all just gestured that, you know exactly what that triggers. And so, Valerie, I think what that statement was, and the people who had that conversation was just this idea that I think at that particular time, and I'm just using Ailey as an example because they were the example that it was brought up in, because I love and respect the company, but we know that we've come so much further. We've come so far. There's so many more variations and understandings of Black dance now. But I think at that particular time and where Ailey was at the time, that even Ailey, the company that is, had to feel that aesthetically that they were doing something that was comparable to whiteness in order to be accepted as a Black dance company. And see, this is what we need to remember, that oftentimes that we were doing things that were almost white in order to be Black. Okay, this is heavy. I'm trying to like peel off the layers. Do you guys remember, if you look at like footage from the Harlem Renaissance, or coarse girls who look like me or lighter, mulatto women, octoroon women, who had to almost look white in order to be considered Black dance? Do you understand? And so there's this idea that Blackness doing whiteness was now Black, okay? And that the only way that Blackness on stage, like Johnnie was talking about, on the on-stage context, could be accepted was that if it was close or similar to whiteness, okay? But now we have come a longer way, where if I want to just roll around on stage and that's Black or human, then that's what it is. You know what I'm saying? So, but I think for so long, because we were trying to, be accepted in the mainstream, that companies like Ailey and others, and again, it's not to, I don't want to make this about Ailey, because I think they're wonderful in what they've done, but we've done so much more, and there's so much more innovation in dance that has come so far. But anyway, I think you guys understand what I'm saying. But just to answer the question, Valerie, I think that for us as Black artists, when Vincent asked you the question, it also helps us to understand, what do other people think? For us, also images matter, because Black people, it's almost like, how we give directions and we're like, oh, turn by the tree with the willows, and, go over to the left side with the red building, because culturally, that's like a big part of who we are. It's not like turn on Reed Street and then make a left on Walker Street, So I think as Black people, we have this sort of inner sensibility that gives us this visual aesthetic, that we see our environment and interpret our environment so much differently, that even as movers in movement, we interpret movement differently than our white counterparts. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. You want to go ahead, Ashley? I'll be really quick. It's what's interesting is phrase Black dance. I think about Soul Train. I think about the dancing in my community center. I think about the dancing in our living room that my parents, when they had house parties, that's where I come from. If I was to think about Ailey, and I love the company, I've got many friends there, it's not the tilt that defined Black dance for me. It was the content. It was seeing revelations and knowing that that was about a culture, an experience of people. And so that's what I tap into. Okay, so what is this Black dance? I stand on stage and you see my skin, you see me, and however I move, it's gonna be Black dance.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. The term Black dance, and I think we're always having to shift and modulate, as you said, be very savvy, because we're always being reinvented through someone else's eyes. Just as you see the changing of our name for our identity as history has evolved, it's the same thing. Black dance is about a certain type of content. And I think the danger comes when only that is being presented as Black dance. Yeah, so it's in some ways can predicate certain stereotypes about the Black experience, which is the challenge I think we face in educating others about the difference between what is Black dance, what truly is the definition of that, does it live in a certain space and time, and what it is to be Black and dancing is different. I mean, I agree, everything I do is going to be Black dance because that's who I am, but not all of my pieces have to be about the Black experience as it's been presented in the media, as it's been presented on stage. Yeah. Wonder where.
I just wanted to say that in watching everybody's work, I sense the work coming from everyone's life experiences in history and ideas and topics that move each artist. And that is, I think, is universal for all artists to do where their life is coming from, what may have happened to them, or their history. And I think it's interesting with what Johnnie says. If you walk out on the stage and does the color of your skin make it so that then it becomes Black dance? But I think the themes that everybody is working with are universal for all artists. And I think it's an interesting thought that does it become Black dance just because you walk out on the stage and you have a certain skin color and you're saying your life experience, does that then make it something specific? Whereas I think all artists are working with what moves them and what their history is and experiences. So I just wanted to throw that in hearing the comments that, that's what I've seen in all of your work. And I think it's something that, is seen everywhere. Does anybody else want to comment before we go to the next question? Leah?
So I think of IBD. So that's an acronym for International Association of Blacks in Dance. And I think about those women who create this organization, which is the 30th anniversary of that organization. I think of Dr. Johnson, may she rest in peace and power, from Howard University. I think of the five, I call it the Fab Five, those organizations who came together to provide this space because they saw there was a deficiency for Black people to have a space to call their own. I think of DCDC, I think Dayton Contemporary Dance Company, I think of Philadelphia, I think of Dallas Black Dance Theater, I think of Cleo Parker Robinson, I think of Louisville Washington Dance Theater, and the aesthetics, and I think of their rep. My question is not so much for others, but I think, when are we as Black and Brown people going to take ownership that that's not just Black dance? And like all of you have said, that the moment you enter a space and knowing the history, what that entails, and pivoting to taking full ownership, knowing that there are already words and phrases in history that are connected behind that, just taking up ownership on a stage. And I think when will, especially, and I know it's also a generational thing too, I know that unfortunately some of our gatekeepers are very wholeheartedly so passionate about this particular, I would almost say, particular subdivision, if you will, of dance, as opposing to being more open and fluid to seeing whatever any Black body creates as Black dance. So for me, I think it's more of a conversation for us to have as a community as opposed to other.
I also wanted to throw in that that came from a conversation with Nicole and myself, that the flip side of that we talked about is being super Afrocentric or super in the African diaspora of that's what your work represents. So if you're not a Camille A. Brown or a Kyle Abraham, we were talking, I believe, about presenters, and even some, like Leah was saying, some inter-community thoughts about each other. I totally agree with the idea of when I hit the stage, whatever work I put out is coming from a Black man. So therefore it is, Black dance. I just wholeheartedly don't think that the dance community on either side see it that way. Because if you think about how people write you up when they're publicizing your work, they will always put, Black or African or something urban that tells you this is Black with a Camille or a Kyle or an Ailey or Dallas Black. But when you go to an artist such as myself, who I am Black all the time, but some of my work or the context of the work doesn't represent that. But if you look at how I'm written up, it doesn't say this young African American man, Gierre Godley, blah blah blah. It's just Gierre Godley. So, and also thinking about some of the Black curators that are now in New York, the work, even though they're not curating the tilt and the leg, they're still curating a specific vision of what Black dance is. And, so yes, so some part we are getting away from the tilt and the leg and the hinge or the contraction. And I do agree with, I believe, Vincent, who said it, that it's about the spirit, but still we're still just going to the other side of the coin where it's like, you need to, monkey and bird to be Black. So.
Yeah, I've run into quite a few problems, even since my comeback is where people say that my work is not Black enough, which just, I'm like, come on, what is that? You tell me what you're thinking, because I also come from that where my work comes from me, and who I identify and how I identify, and that's where my work is based. And so I am a Black, gender nonconforming person, and that's what you're going to get. I put me out there. So, I was quiet for most of these questions just because I have a very, very strong viewpoint on it. But I feel like we've been pigeonholed, as artists, because I know from seeing you all's work that you don't see those stereotypical movements and things. So yeah, it's just it's a lot, but I feel like our work is beautiful, and it comes from us, and it shouldn't be. It's not a script,
I definitely can relate to that, Nick, like completely, because we've been told in more or less words that our work isn't Black enough because we're not telling the Black story in the way that, I guess, honestly, white consumers usually want us to tell the Black story.
Mm-hmm.
It's like and it happens in the queer community too. Like we're not the right kind of queer. We talk about Blackness too much to be queer. We're not light and glittery and airy enough. And then we're almost like too detailed in our experiences, I guess it feels like, and it's too personal almost, that it's not the right kind of Black art.
Also, I wonder, like, not to be that guy, but I wonder if it's because with our work, I'm speaking, and because I'm light skinned, maybe people think that it's not Black enough. I was also wondering too, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Gierre. I was wondering if people also don't call your work Black because you're light skinned, and maybe people might not know if you're Black, you know, because people come up to me and they say that all the time, like, are you even Black? Or like, I've said it in our work. I've said, you know, I am not half white. I'm not mixed. And people still ask me, oh, so yeah, so is it your mom or your dad who's white? You know, so I wonder if that has something to do with it as well for our work and then also yours.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I never thought about that. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so I think this really ties into the first question about perception of what Blackness is, of what our art is, and definitely how we see each other and how we see ourselves.
I also think it tied into the question about when one story came up in a conversation, actually also with Nicole and Gierre, is about when telling your story isn't enough, and how someone thinks the story's supposed to look, or just like a lot of ideas associated with that. So I think that some other thoughts on this list came up in that question. So thanks for bringing in all the other thoughts. It was great to hear. And I think it's also a good segue into what, and this came up in Nikki and Vincent's conversation about being labeled a Black artist first, but not as an artist first. And how are people responding to, like, how do you want to be perceived as an artist? What is your preference?
I'll just jump on in there. Because for me personally, like I want to be called a Black lesbian artist. And that I do that in a way to like call my ancestors into the space and call people who paved the way for us to do the art that we do in the way that we do it. So for me, like, yes, call me. Like I want your mouth. I want your white mouth to say Black lesbian. Like I want you to say that. And I want to be called that for me. And I wear that as a badge of honor, and I carry my ancestors with me every step I take, but especially on stage. Like we're not alone on stage when it's just us two. We got our tribe. We got millions and millions of ancestors behind us, with us on that stage, in front of us, surrounding us on that stage with us. So I want to be called a Black artist. Always.
And we're going to be called that anyway.
Yeah.
So we might as well use it and define it for ourselves and
embrace it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think identity is important in that regard. And it's really also about how you want to be identified. I think that's a great point. You know, I also think about this from a cultural context. You know, I'm here in Liberia right now, where, you know, when we're in the African context, it's not necessary for us to say Black or African, you know what I'm saying? But in the Western context, it is. Because then there's other notions. There's notions of oppression. There's notions of repression. There's notions of suppression. So we have to constantly be reiterating ourselves in the Western context, and so that whereas it's not as necessary in the Black African context, you know what I mean, for obvious reasons. Yes and no. Let me take that back, because there's also the colonial influence and colonial rule that is still very present in the African context, sort of in the subtext of it all. But I think that's important to the larger conversation of identity as artists. You know, because let's say, for example, if you have a Black African dance cultural troupe here, you know, a VI, a Pele group, who are dancing traditional dances, they don't need to be called the African VI Pele cultural dance troupe. You understand? I think you guys know what I'm saying. Or like how even when we see West African dance companies in America, you know, we don't have to say Black African unless they want to say such and such and such African dance troupe. But I think as artists in America, when we perform, because we're mostly performing in the American, in the Western context, that yes, we do have to say, we do have to reiterate Blackness or reiterate whatever it is that we choose to be called, so that other people know, because context is everything. You know what I'm saying? Or like, for example, I think it was Nia, were you talking about we were talking about light skin. Colorism also plays a role. I'm sorry, Ness or Nia, my bad. I don't want to.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, colorism is also a thing, the same thing. Oh, how are you? And oh, I've never seen an African person look like you before. And I said, wow, I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry that maybe you haven't been exposed to the fact that there are light-skinned people or everywhere for various reasons. In Liberia, we say we can't help who born you. That means like you can't help how you were born or how you came into this world or what led up to that or what was made to create you, right? So it's the same thing as artists, how you want to identify. We got people behind us. There's people in the bloodline that come up, so, but I do think that, what was, I don't want to misrepresent Nick. Sorry, guys, I'm just flipping through the phone here. Nick was talking about, reclaiming, like, I don't necessarily need to say or be defined by somebody else about who I am on the stage, because when I'm on the stage, that is who I am. That is what I am. I'm not sure if it was Nick who said that. But yeah, like, I think that identifying yourself as such as an artist is necessary, but I also think that the context has to do with how we choose to define ourselves.
Can I jump in there real quick? I just now my mind just kind of switched a little bit, and it's because I realized that like I actually consistently understand myself as a Black artist, especially again from the historical standpoint, and also because of the philosophical lineage and stuff like that. But like I'm noticing that I spend more time talking about me being a Black artist versus the work. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, even in this conversation, I'm talking about being Black, but I don't know anything about anybody's work still. All these Black artists on here. I know Nia Ness, I know Gierre, like I know some of these people like personally, but I have not spent time talking about the nitty gritty in the work. And I think that is like literally the reason why I would say artist, because I'm tired of sitting and watching someone like William Forsythe talk about work and not have to talk about whiteness, and I have to talk about Blackness and not actually talk about, I don't know, the people I work with, or I don't know, the struggles of building a business. Like, like, you know what I mean? Like, all of that is like so much more important than my identity thing, which is, I think is coming from the stage idea and the mentality of presenting. And so, yeah, I feel like coming as an artist in my head and in my body first, knowing that I'm working in capitalism is important. So I am a Black artist because that's what you're seeing, but I feel like there's a part of me that just believes I'm an artist in general, and that's the only way I can do this.
You better speak. Because what Laurie was talking about context, and then what Johnnie just brought in, for one thing, it's very important about self-understanding and self-identifying. But then two, I don't want you to call me a Black artist if that's just going to line your pocket, or if I'm just filling a quota in your season of we need a Black person, we need a gay person, we'll do a European artist and a ballet company. Now that's why you need to be Black, then I don't want to do it. And I feel like I see that a lot. And again, that's from the outside looking in, but just, when history repeats itself, hell, it gotta be true. So that's my 2 cents. But yeah, yeah, Johnnie. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to maybe use this as a segue to this question. And this came up in a Laurie and Ted's conversation. They're speaking about their dancers and who is dancing, and what is, if there's a Black message in the work, or it's about culture, and it's danced by a mixed cast or by white dancers, what is coming up or surrounding that. And Ted said that he feels that his work is an extension of him. And so that, whoever is dancing it is carrying carrying the message out into the world. And I thought that was an interesting comment that was brought up. And I think there's probably a lot of different feelings about that. And I think he even was having a white dancer dance something, and the presenter didn't know, or somebody in the audience didn't know that the choreographer was Black. And so it brought up something like, well, you know, how are these white dancers dancing a certain message? And I think this is where the context of that comment came up in the conversation. So if somebody wants to jump into that.
Well, I mean, first off, you know, you can't tell no grown person what to do. That's the first thing. So they, you know, as a grown artist, you can do whatever you want to do and have your work presented however you feel like you want it to be presented and who want to dance it. I think as the choreographer, you have a duty to whatever message you are sending your dancers on stage to share for you, to interpret for you, to explore for themselves, that they need to be accurately directed or guided through that process. You know, no one will ever have any, you know, I could dance a piece by a female choreographer and I would never be able to have her experience or relate it or be able to relate to it. But it's all about the directing or the guiding through that process of understanding what it is. And maybe that is the message or the intent of the choreographer. So, I mean, I think, again, like I said, I think, you know, it's someone's choice. And if they choose to do that, I think there is a responsibility behind how you coach and direct and share information to that artist that's performing your work.
Yeah, that conversation with Ted was awesome. What we were talking about was some of the work that we had choreographed, and I choreographed a piece called the Overcomer Suite. At that time was about lunch counter sit-ins. Diane Nash, she was one of the people who was sort of like the underdog women that people don't know about during the civil rights era, and how when they trained these civil rights kids, you know, at Fisk University to go and sit in at these lunch counters when they would get arrested, they would have another group ready and waiting to sit in. And the piece started out like that in the beginning, where I had the dancers coming in. It was danced by all women. And the clip that I gave for Uncommon Ground to show was the piece that my company performed at APAP. But the piece was actually created at a creative residency at University of Delaware on all white dancers. And so that's sort of the context of that conversation. So yeah, I feel like anyone can create and produce the work, because the story is authentic, because it's a human story. Because before I'm Black, I'm simply human. So when I came out of my mother's womb, I was a human being. And then the stories, the experiences that are shared upon me or that became a part of me were ultimately became because I was Black in the world that I lived in. But I came out as a human. So I tell human experiences. I tell spiritual experiences through my work. And I just happen to be Black. And then again, with context, that's when storytelling through movement or choreography can become more racialized depending on the context. So yeah, I think that anyone can tell our stories. It's just about how we choose to tell them. I work with white dancers all the time. In fact, let me tell you this: the higher I go in my career, the whiter it gets. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know if anybody can attest to that. And now I'm in the university setting and I'm teaching a lot. And so I'm in an academic world where, you know, Black pedagogy is rejected because it's different than white pedagogy. And so it's like culturally different, and all these other, Vincent kind of knows what I'm talking about. I don't know if he'll step in here, but anyway, so just dealing with the idea again of context. So yeah, I think anyone can tell our stories as long as it's authentic to the person who's telling it, and sharing the authenticity of those experiences through the person who is then articulating that story. Meaning I may be Black and the dancers may be white, but if they're doing it justice by bringing honor to the story, then I feel like then the bill has been paid. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you, Laurie. I'm going to move us into a final question because of time. And if we could just go around, and I'm sort of going to combine a couple of different things here. And it's one thing you didn't get to say in the conversation when you did your first one, that maybe you left the conversation and wished you had said something, or maybe you said everything you wanted to say. So it's that, or is there something you want the world to know about you and your work? So there's a couple different options in here, and I'm sort of going to slide into another question so you can have your choice. If there's an intention you would like to put into the world for your work in the art form and for other artists of color.
Thank you so much. And I would say what I would, the final thought that I would say is to stay and stand in your power of humanity. And I appreciate Laurie bringing up that, yes, when we were born, we were humans first. And so, yeah, so the integrity, the realness, the ancestors, all that comes, things that came before us and that's going to come in front of us, we have to just stay true to that. And these are, I mean, we're telling our stories. We're telling about experiences that we have lived and want to live. You know, I think for my art, I do art because I want to know more about ... myself, the world I live in, my experiences. So I will continue to stand in my power.
Thank you, Vincent.
I'll go next. Yeah, this is going to feel like a huge tangent, but it is related to many things that have been said. As a dancer and as a researcher, I became really, really interested in zombies and in the ways that I find myself zombified, in the ways that my environment has been zombified, and really seeking to disrupt that or dismantle it. I would not disrupt, but dismantle it and sort of wake up and become more alive and more of an active agent in the world. And that is a lot of what my art focuses on. Thank you.
I just think that the commitment to being your authentic self is really important. And you never know how you're going to impact others in that way. You've got to be honest with yourself about your work and how you're choosing to put the work out there. And just make no apologies for that as well.
Thank you, Ashley. How about Nikki?
So yeah, I've always just tried to be me, and just I tell my truth and I tell my story, and it comes from an honest and very humble place. And I feel like the conversation that I had with Vincent, we got it all out there. And so yeah, I just I stand in my truth, and I present the ideas as I want them to be seen, and I do it the way that I know how best, you know.
One of the underlying themes in my work is community. I feel there's such strength in numbers. I think that I can't say enough for us to stop relying on others to provide us with opportunities, but for us to really come together and to provide opportunities within our own communities. I know I said I had that conversation, touch base a little bit with me and Ness when we had our conversation, and I can never say that enough, just to take the leap of faith.
That has been inspiring my work, and I mentioned it earlier, is just really having open communication, open dialogue with myself, my collaborators, and other artists. And so I just want to to continue to put that out in the world, for us to continue to talk to each other, and not even on a platform or, or on someone's podcast or vlog or YouTube channel, but just continue to have open conversation with other Black artists, with other artists of color, and just to continue to grow. Like, Leah said, community is a big thing. And so I feel in some ways we are so separate, but we can be powerful if we just come a little back together and understand each other as artists and as humans. I also just wanted to put out into the universe that no one can measure your level of excellence or success. And so, be mindful of how much power you give to someone else to tell you that you are worthy and that you are great.
Thank you, Gierre. Nia and Ness?
I just need to say thank you for saying that,
Yeah.
Gierre.
Yeah.
We just really needed to hear that.
Definitely.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that was timely.
Yeah. For me, I just wanted to continue to bear our souls in our work. For us, there's no separation between our work and our everyday lives. Like, it's all continuous because it all stems from a conversation. So it's all happening. Like, we're creating work right now, in this moment. So just continuing to do that and continuing to learn how to heal through our work because it's so painful. It's our work. We really continue to relive trauma. So right now I'm on this personal journey of trying to find healing through our work rather than just reopening wounds consistently, just to heal them up again, just to reopen them.
Yeah, basically what you said, just continue sharing your story,
Mm-hmm.
telling your story, and honestly, don't let anybody else tell it for you.
Yeah.
It's yours.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Johnnie?
All right. The one thing I didn't say, and I'll just end with the intention, is that I feel like work takes time. And it's something I want to point out and say, Valerie, specifically to you. Back in the day when I did take root, I started a project and it wasn't finished, but it's taking 6 years to do. And I want to make sure you know that that root that happened then, it takes so much time for us all to do work. And Black work, time is one of the most important things to do it. Any ritual or any deeper process that goes through to get through all these codes. And so with that, I have an intention. Like, that intention is to provide time and space personally for this feeling of unrestricted imagination to be embodied for Black and other people in general in the future is very important to me. And so that is something I think, thank you for asking that question, for 2021 that I'm pushing for in my life. Definitely to provide that space and time for.
I also want to say that as the founder of Green Space, that I wanted to be able to hold space with all of you in this final conversation, but I just also want to acknowledge that I'm aware that I am the only white person in these boxes. And I have some fear and vulnerability around that, and I just want to be honest and say that I feel that, but I also want to be with you and curating you and providing you these opportunities to be together with you and stand with you and to learn from you, and to also be, as it said, an extension of getting your voices out, and to do that with pride and honor, and to move that forward. And I realize that Laurie's back, so Laurie, can you go? And then
We'll get you here.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, just take control of your own narrative. It's yours, it's ours, whatever that is for you, for us. And don't change it, don't modify it to fit what we think works for other people or makes other people feel comfortable. I did that earlier in my work because I wanted to get grants and I wanted to perform and tour and all of that, but I had to do away with that. So be authentic, and I control my narrative, you control yours, and be firm and stand firm on your narrative, and regardless of the outcome, because what's for you is for you. It'll be right. It'll work out. It's going to work in your favor. It'll be for you if it's really meant to be. And even if it's not, you make it what it's supposed to be. as an artist, as a performer, as a human being, as a soul, as a spirit.
Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this new program, for sharing what you believe in, for sharing your stories, which are enough. Thank you for educating me, and hopefully, in turn, educating people who watch this, and to see how we can, I guess, shift this lens and to continue to learn, to grow, to be human in all the ways that we can be, our best, and to be in community with one another. So here's to a more positive 2021 in getting all of yours and mine, everybody, the world's voices and history and life experiences out. So thank you, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you for this platform. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
It's wonderful meeting everyone, and thank you so much, Valerie, for doing this for us. And I'll see you all in.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This is
Guys, have a good
wonderful.
year.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.